This will be a quick introduction into the field of amateur astronomy and a little bit of an introduction to telescopes. And I'm going to show you some pictures from star parties. I've been to star parties in, about 4 or 5 states so far, I think. And the two that I'll show you pictures of are from the Washington Star Party, which used to be outside of Ellensburg and has now moved up on Highway 97 just short of the Canadian border, and also the Oregon Star Party, which is down in central Oregon. This is the location where the Table Mountain Star Party used to be. It was called Table Mountain, is where it was, and it's about an hour north out of Ellensburg to drive up there. Pretty place, lots of nice trees. Unfortunately, they burned down. I don't remember how many years ago now, but close to a decade ago there was a forest fire started by lightning in early September, and it pretty much wrecked the place. So the Forest Service doesn't want people up there anymore. There are a lot of burned trees that are in danger of falling over, and they don't want 700 people camping up there anymore. This was pictures from the 2007 Star Party. Just a little bit of information there. This is the road into the site. A little bit bumpy, but usable. There's the location of the registration tent. Here's something that's popular there, although most people do their own cooking and they have a fancier dinner meal, but there's also this little food truck there, and the prices weren't bad. They're way less than they would be at a Mariners game. $3.75 for a hamburger wasn't unreasonable in 2007, especially when you consider they had the drive up there. Here's a view from up near the site, just a short walk away from the main site, looking toward Mount Stewart, or the Stewart Range up there. Here's the type of telescopes that you can see up there. This is might have been made from a kit, or you can buy these professionally made. The thing about a telescope like this is that the eyepiece is way up there at the top, and if you're aimed close to straight up, you have to climb a fairly tall ladder in the dark to be able to look through the eyepiece. So that's a consideration when you're buying telescopes like this. This one might be 18 to 24 inches in diameter for the mirror, something like that. So a pretty good sized telescope, although this design can be taken apart, and the poles are the longest part, but they all separate, and you can get this into the back of just a minivan. It's not a huge thing. Most of it you can get into the back of a small car, and if you can tie those poles on top, you could do that in just a regular passenger car. Here's a location where they have the evening meals if you happen to purchase that plan. I think I've only done that once. Usually I just do my own cooking. Popular spot up there besides the outhouses. They have lots of outhouses, and they clean them twice a day during the star parties, so they're not horrible. But this is the telescope field at Table Mountain. This was early in the star party, before a lot of people had gotten up there to set up their telescopes. It gets more crowded here as the weekend goes on. Now it's getting more crowded. Those tents that they have there are some special observing tents that a company makes, and the center room on them you can open up so it's open to the sky, but you can still keep your telescope out of the sun and rain if it happens to rain. Lots more telescopes in every direction of many different types. It's a fun place. People wrap their telescopes in those space blankets during the day. That keeps the sun off of them. Here's a sort of famous telescope for up there. This is a large refracting telescope. Most people don't buy refracting telescopes. They're expensive, for one thing. But this is one that was, I haven't been to this star party in several years, but it was owned by a guy who was in the Bellingham Police Department, or Fire Department, and he had painted it up like this, and everybody refers to this telescope as the John Deere. and it's like the landmark on the telescope field. And if somebody asks you where you're set up, you can say, oh, I'm about 50 feet north of the John Deere, and they'll know exactly where you are. So that's how, and he puts little flowers around the base of it and stuff like that. But this is a nice telescope to look through. It is the best view I've ever seen of Jupiter was through this telescope. And at the time, one of Jupiter's moons was crossing its face, and you couldn't see the moon because it blended in with Jupiter. They were both about the same color. However, you could see the shadow of the moon on the face of Jupiter, and it was just this crisp little black circle. It was really nice. They have competitions for various things, telescopes and stuff like that, but also observing equipment. And these are some observing chairs. When you have a telescope that's tilted at a bunch of different angles, you'd like to have a chair that can be set at different heights for observing. And people who enjoy woodworking do a lot of things like this. People who enjoy woodworking might also make a telescope like this. This is a design called a split ring equatorial mount, and that's a homemade telescope there. It used to be at these star parties you could see equipment that you wouldn't see anywhere else, and so this was in kind of pre-internet days. You'd go up there and buy used equipment sometimes, but also a lot of new stuff, and there'd be vendors selling things. Now the internet is such a good place to buy stuff that a lot of that kind of selling has gone away, but they still have the vendor's booth, and people sell things like astronomy themed art and maybe ceramics and stuff like that, astronomy jewelry, stuff like that. I bought my wife a few pairs of earrings at star parties, so just that kind of thing. They also have an espresso stand up there. This is the only place I know where you can go and have to wait in line at 3 o'clock in the morning to buy an espresso. So there's Mount Stewart again. I love the views up there at Table Mountain. It's a shame that they can't have it up there anymore. It's just more of the views up there. This is a tent that they have at Table Mountain for speeches, and they bring in outside speakers. I've heard NASA astronauts several times give talks at star parties. They'll bring in astronomers to give talks on particular things. I heard a talk on bats of the area one time and geology of the area, stuff like that. At the Washington Star Party, they have this tent, which is a kids tent, and they've got all kinds of activities for kids at those things. This is something that happens at the end of every star party, and that's a door prize drawing. They'll give more than $10,000 worth of astronomy related door prizes away every year. The grand prize is usually a telescope with a set of eyepieces, but they have lots of other things that they give away too. I think I've hardly ever won anything at a star party. One year, one of my daughters won a star atlas, and she gave it to me because she wasn't interested in it. And I think at the one in Montana that I went to, I won a pen that had a little LED light in it, but I think everybody won one of those. But it's kind of fun. This is a picture of the scenery at the Oregon Star Party, and this is some of my observing equipment here. That tripod on the left there is a binocular stand called a parallelogram mount, and the original plans called for a single parallelogram, which I thought was a little unstable, and so I made a dual parallelogram binocular mount, and have used that, and I'm now upgrading it for use with heavier binoculars. So here's a popular thing that I first saw at the Oregon Star Party, and then the Washington Star Party started using them, and that's a mobile shower. I would often camp for several days before I got to the Oregon Star Party, and it was quite a relief to be able to take a shower finally once I got there. And plus the Oregon Star Party is kind of a hot site, and it's not uncommon to have days in the 90s and you're just kind of baking there, so it's nice to clean off once in a while. Something they have at the Oregon Star Party is what they call the Telescope Walkabout, and usually they'll walk around a half a dozen or 8 or 10 new telescopes that people have brought to the star party and talk about how they made it and the innovations. And an innovation that as far as I know, was first developed in the Pacific Northwest, and it's to have the diagonal mount for the telescope, or the diagonal mirror for the telescope, supported by wires. And you may not see that here too well, but there you can. That series of wires is supporting the secondary mirror, is what you call it, in the telescope. And by adjusting the tension in the wires, you can change the aim of that secondary mirror. And by using wires to support it, they don't diffract much light, and so you can get better images through your telescope. They've got a thin piece of plywood covering the mirror down there at the base of the telescope right now. This is what the camping ground looks like at the Oregon Star Party. People tend to park along the road there, and they don't have necessarily a regular telescope field like they do at the Washington one. It's more spread out. But generally you can visit other people's telescopes and ask if you can look through their telescope, and they'll usually let you do that, unless they're doing something like an observing project where they're taking pictures of things and stuff like that. But usually you can do that. They have an astrophotography area at the Oregon Star Party where they already outlaw bright lights. There are no white lights allowed. You have to use red, or I sometimes use amber LED lights that you can dim and not bother things. But in the astrophotography area, even those lights are frowned on, and it's a pretty dark part of the site there. There's other types of equipment that you see there. This is an observing table where they could open that up and use it to have their star atlases in there. They probably have some kind of dim red lights inside there for looking at it. This is a neat little thing I saw one year. It's a binocular chair, and it's sitting on a turntable. And I bought the guy was selling plans for these, so I bought the plans, and haven't made one yet, but it's kind of a neat little thing. Anyway. And then back to the Washington Star Party. This was looking at Mount Rainier at sunset one night up there. Very scenic place. And I just enjoy going and camping for a few days and sitting around or walking around talking to people about things and stuff like that. It's just a nice break in the summer.